Remember back in October 2022 at the CCP's 20th Party Congress closing ceremony? A shocking scene unfolded right in front of the world's media. Former leader Hu Jintao tried to examine a red folder. The official next to him, Li Zanshu, blocked him. When Hu turned to check Xi Jinping's folder, she slammed it shut and immediately ordered Hu to be escorted out, even though Hu was visibly reluctant. So you remember this picture. This picture is world famous. Um, Behind the dramatic moment stood one key figure, that is Hu Chunhua. The file Hu Jintao tried to check contained the list of China's next top leaders, and his protege, Hu Chunhua, who was once groomed to be CCP's crown prince to succeed Xi Jinping, wasn't on it. At that very party congress, Hu was pushed out of the Politburo and sidelined into semi-retirement mode. So he's now one of the vice chairman of CPPCC. Soon after, his allies and associates were purged in sweeping crackdown. And according to his former legal counsel, Mr. Du Wen, who now lives in Europe, Xi Jinping had long sought to eliminate Hu Chunhua, but Hu Jintao fiercely protected the junior Hu. And Mr. Du said that without Hu Jintao's intervention, Hu Chunhua would have already been locked up in prison. And now, after surviving years of setbacks and bearing the title of the discarded crown prince, Hu Chunhua's moment may finally be here. He's emerging as the most likely candidate to lead China after Xi Jinping. However, he's not without competition. So let's talk about why Hu Chunhua is back in the spotlight and why the signs point to him becoming Xi's possible successor. From March 30th to April 3rd, Hu Zhenhua, who is currently a vice chairman of the CPPCC, led a delegation on an inspection tour of Anhui province. The official theme of the tour was rural village preservation and promoting traditional culture. On the surface, it looked like just any other routine visit, but for those of us watching the CCP politics closely, this trip stood out. Why? Because Anhui is the home province of Hu Chunhua's mentor, Hu Jintao, and the late premier Li Keqiang, two key figures in the Hu Jintao faction, although Li Keqiang died. Of all the places Hu Zhenhua could have picked to visit, he chose the home province of his mentor and Li Keqiang. Immediately following his visit to Anhui, the People's Daily and Xinhua News Agency suddenly started running a flood of reports about a place in Tibet that you have not heard of. It's called Lingzhi. Now, what does that matter? Well, this place, Ningzhi or Lingzhi, happens to be Hu Chunhua's political starting point. Back in the 1980s and early 90s, he worked there as deputy secretary of the Tibet Youth League and deputy commissioner of Ningzhi. Even today, many of his old friends or allies still hold influence in the region. And then on April 7th, People's Daily published a piece praising the Ningzhi government for solving urban development problems. A pretty unusual spotlight for such a remote area to be featured, in People's Daily. Political commentator Jiang Weiping, who used to be a Hong Kong a correspondent working for a Hong Kong newspaper called Wenhui Bao, which is a CCP newspaper, he said this wasn't random. So he said the top editors at People's Daily and Xinhua were certainly picking up on the change in political winds. They started highlighting Hu Chunhua's past achievements and his lingering influence. It's a pretty clear signal that Hu Chunhua is back and will play an important role. Between April 6th and 8th, Xinhua's Tibet channel ran several more stories about Ningzhi. They covered everything about this place, from the booming low altitude economy and cultural tourism to a new uh, air flight themed, it's called Peach Blossom Love Route. Now, on the surface, these just seem like feel good local development stories, but in reality, they were building momentum for Hu Chunhua's comeback. When both Xinhua and People's Daily start praising the same place linked to Hu Chunhua's political starting point, it usually means the party elders have reached a consensus. And in this case, the consensus is backing Hu Chunhua. And it didn't stop there. A few days later, another interesting article popped up, and this time it's about tea. And it's titled, Tea Takes Flight. It talked about villagers using drones to transport tea. But the phrase takes flight was symbolic, a nod to Hu Chunhua's political rise. So it wasn't a coincidence that such a faraway place in Tibet, which was Hu Chunhua's old turf, was suddenly receiving so much positive media attention. This wasn't local propaganda, it was approved by higher ups. And during that time, from April 8th to 17th, Hu Zhenhua led a delegation to visit 3 countries in Africa, including Nigeria and Senegal. But Chinese state media and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs strangely remained silent until the last day of Hu's visit. Now, going with Hu were 2 key officials active during Hu Jintao's time. And they were former deputy minister of the organization department. And his name is Shen Yueyue, who is now a vice chairman of CPPCC also, but ranking after Hu Chunhua. And the other man is Zhou Qiang, who was the former party secretary of Hunan province and also the former head of China's Supreme People's Court. These 2 key Hu Jintao era of officials accompanied Hu Chunhua to Africa, and this sent a political signal. Some say that the trio may be the core leadership team that Hu Jintao has assembled. Now, as far as the media silence, it was said that Hu Jintao wanted the junior Hu Chunhua, to be somewhat active on international stage, but remain low-key domestically to stay out of trouble. And that's why Xinhua didn't report his trip until the last day. Now, let's talk about why all these signs matter and what they really point to. Xinhua News has given a clue just very recently. The People's Daily just published an article that's getting a lot of attention. On May 1st, they ran a front page piece titled, Inspiring the Youth of the New Era to Show Their Responsibilities in Building Chinese Style Modernization. The article didn't just mention young people in general. That title has a very obvious hint. It specifically highlighted the Communist Youth League, which, as many of you know, is the breeding ground for many members of the Hu Jintao faction. Even more interesting, the article hinted that the Youth League should prepare for a succession role. And it wasn't just People's Daily. The same message appeared in one of the CCP's official publications, the Qiushi magazine, which is known to be the magazine that always sticks closely to Xi Jinping's propaganda line. So that's a clear signal to party insiders. The Hu Jintao faction is back, and get ready. However, I must say, however, Xi Jinping is not sitting idle, waiting to be replaced. He knows that his loyal followers, people like Li Qiang and Cai Qi, have almost no chance of securing the top job. So he's actively looking for other candidates. He recently visited Shanghai. While there, he dropped a clear hint that he may be preparing to pass the baton. So who has he picked? The answer? Shanghai Party Secretary Chen Jining. So he's 61 years old, 1 year younger than Hu Chunhua. He's a technocrat, but what really sets him apart from other CCP officials is that he spent 5 years studying in the West. In 1988, he went to Brunel University in London for his master's and earned a PhD in civil and environmental engineering from Imperial College London, completing it in 1993. So before entering politics, Dr. Chen served as president of Tsinghua University, and in 2015, he became Minister of Environmental Protection. In 2017, he was appointed mayor of Beijing, and in 2022, he became the party secretary of Shanghai, succeeding Li Qiang, who was promoted to be the premier. All of these appointments and promotions took place under Xi Jinping. So he's politically aligned with the Xi Jinping faction, but his technocrat background and Western education also make him acceptable to other factions. So Xi Jinping's choice of Chen Jining is no accident. The party secretary of Shanghai is often a launch pad to national leadership. So, for example, Xi Jinping held the job before becoming vice president, and Li Qiang was Shanghai's leader before becoming premier. So, Xi Jinping's strategy is very clear. He wants to pick someone who can be accepted by all factions. So, Chen Jinping's technocrat background and Western education make him especially appealing. Some might wonder, if Xi Jinping is so anti-Western, how can he back a Western educated leader like Chen, right? Well, it's about compromise because Xi Jinping himself rose to power as a compromise choice. So going back 12 years ago or even 13 years ago, when Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao factions were debating who should succeed Hu Jintao to be the fifth CCP leader, they couldn't reach a consensus. Jiang Zemin wanted Bo Xilai to succeed Hu, while Hu Jintao preferred Li Keqiang. Neither side would budge, so they compromised, and they picked Xi Jinping, thinking that he would follow both their directions. So you see, Xi Jinping got the job because he was acceptable to all factions. That's exactly why Chen Jining is now Xi Jinping's best choice. Um, so here's what happened. To show Xi Jinping's support for Chen, he even changed his usual style of dressing. Did you notice something different in this picture about Xi Jinping? His clothing. Xi Jinping is not known to wear a sports jacket when he is in a casual setting. And all his officials wear the same jacket. Unless in a formal setting, I mean, Xi Jinping wears a suit with a tie. But all the casual settings, he wear this navy jacket. This time in Shanghai, he wore a suit jacket, right? A sports jacket. This is a big change. I believe Xi Jinping was sending a message. He's not completely opposed to Western culture, which is necessary if Chen Jinping's candidacy is going to be taken seriously. So now let's compare the two candidates. Hu Zhenhua's strength is obvious. He's experienced, pragmatic, with a clean record, no obvious corruption scandals. He has strong backing from the Hu Jintao faction and party elders, and he's known for being hands-on and willing to take on challenges. His weaknesses? He's been sidelined by Xi Jinping since 2022, currently holds no power positions. And factional rivalries, especially from Xi Jinping's remaining allies, could still block his rise. Now, Chen Jinin's strength is that he's perceived as competent, and his Western education appeals to international circles and certainly reformists. And as party secretary of Shanghai, he is in a key position that often leads to national leadership, right? But his weaknesses are serious. He has no factional base of his own. He does not have strong supporter other than Xi Jinping. And also, he lacks deep experience with rural governance and poverty issues, areas where Hu Chunhua knows well. And his third weakness is Xi Jinping's support. If Xi's faction weakens, his political support could vanish quickly. So, as far as who will get the job depends on who retains power in the party. If Xi Jinping does, then Dr. Chen will will rise to the top. If Xi Jinping loses, then Hu Chunhua will finally rose from a crown prince to the top guy.